Welcome to Cardinals Cover 2 with Craig Grialou and Mike Jurecki. Cardinals Cover 2 is brought to you by Arizona Cardinals Podcasts. Visit azcardinals.com/podcasts. From the Dignity Health Arizona Cardinals Training Center, here's Craig Grialou and Mike Jurecki.
Well, it has finally arrived. It is Combine Week. And this time, Wednesday, and then again Thursday, plus Friday. We'll be live in Indianapolis, Indiana for the 2019 NFL Combine. Really looking forward to it. My first experience, so basically I'm just going to be holding your hand, MJ, the entire time and following you around like a little puppy dog.
Yeah, well, we got it figured out. I've been there a few times, fortunate. And so obviously when you have the first pick in the draft, and there's going to be some other Arizona media, but the good news is we're going to have Kliff Kingsbury and General Manager Steve Keim on the show. And, Wednesday they're talking to the media, so it'll be interesting. I feel for Kingsbury, though, he's going to be fielding a lot of Kyle Murray questions.
Yeah, it's not going to be a lot of fun for him, but I can assure you this, he's not going to get any of those questions from either one of us.
Well, I mean, it's going to be asked, and obviously, I
understand why.
I think a lot of teams, and including the Cardinals with the first pick, you want Kyler Murray to make some noise, and I think Dwayne Haskins probably upside probably is the best, and we'll figure it out. If Drew Lock looks like he's going to throw, the Peter Schrager today said he doesn't even know if Kyler Murray is going to even do the measurements. This is a job interview.
This is the one thing, and I know we're getting a little sidetracked here, and
Sure.
We'll talk more Combine as we go throughout the show, but if you are, quote, fully committed to football, as Kyler Murray said he is, then why are you not completely committed to participating in the Combine?
Craig, I get the not throwing there because, he's got his pro day. We talked about the date, March 13th, which is the first day you can start announcing free agents. You can start negotiating on March 11th, so we'll get to the second phase of the offseason. But, Andrew Luck didn't throw. Cam Newton threw, and he wasn't very effective. It didn't affect his status. I get it. Get to March 13th. It's scripted. He's throwing the receivers he's familiar with. But
You're in a controlled environment. I get it. I understand it.
But Lamar Jackson last year didn't want to run the 40. Because he thought teams are going to move him to wide receiver. Kyle Murray should run the 40. If he gets into 4.3s, he's going to even have higher expectations or higher publicity. And then you look at some of these other guys, So it'd be interesting to see how many quarterbacks go in the first round. It looks like 4, and then we could see guys like Ryan Finley possibly in the second or third round, who's got a bunch of starts in his career, 24 years old. Will Greer from West Virginia is in that same boat. But he's going to get a ton of questions just based on his comments, and we know us dealing with conference calls throughout the season, anytime you play an opposing team, I don't care how good they're playing, if they're on a losing streak, the opposing head coach just lays on the syrup for the entire conference call. And, Belichick's one of the best because you can just ask him about the Cardinals defense, and he'll give you a rundown of every single player. So I understand what he's doing. But that was then. This is now.
Absolutely. The coaches and general managers speak on Wednesday, some into Thursday as well, and then the prospects Thursday, Friday, and then some of them will be on the field during those days as well. But the big ones, wide receivers and quarterbacks, take place on Saturday, and we'll have all of it for you right here on Cards Cover 2 and, of course, on azcardinals.com. And with that, let's take off on this Monday here from the Dignity Health Arizona Cardinals Training Center. Here's what's ahead on the show. Patrick Peterson's actions speak louder than his words. We'll talk Combine. Might Kliff Kingsbury have an advantage over his peers when it comes to interviewing prospects? The interview process and medicals always important this week. On those subjects, current Cardinal players offer advice to prospects. And, of course, your questions via social media using the hashtag CardsCover2, hashtag CardsCover2, using the number 2 to get involved in the show. And we'll have special social media questions as well the entire time we're in Indianapolis, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. So keep that in mind as well if you've got a particular question about a prospect or whether the Cardinals might have interest or just the whatever is said as well during those 3 days that we are out there, especially on Wednesday when the coaches and general managers reach the podium and speak for 5, 10, 15 minutes at a time and get all kinds of questions.
Yeah, usually about 12 to 15 minutes, and then they tell you you're done, and then they'll bring somebody else in to be on different podiums. But, Yeah, I mean, we're all looking forward to being there. And as you mentioned, we'll have bonus coverage and obviously doing the live shows. And we'll be there through Saturday. Our flight is until Saturday evening if something pops. But we got some local guys here. Now, unfortunately, University of Arizona doesn't have a single guy invited. ASU has a couple players. NAU has a wide receiver that put up big numbers in the Big Sky. And so we'll have some local stories. And then you got Brian Murphy, who's a corner, local guy. So be interesting to see, some of these local guys and, where they're going to be on draft day, like Christian Kirk was at home. And, a lot of guys, if you're not a first-round pick and you don't want to melt in that green room, you usually have a party at your house, and hopefully you get drafted on Thursday or Friday because you don't want to wait till Saturday.
Yeah, N'Keal Harry will now run the two ASU products, and Emmanuel Butler from NAU, big-time wide receiver as well. So we'll keep an eye on all of those from Indianapolis. A couple of news and notes here on this Monday, and this is big. No longer will fans travel on Bethany Home Road to get to State Farm Stadium. The road, or at least a 2-mile stretch near the stadium, has been renamed Cardinals Way. The official unveiling happened this morning. Team president Michael Bidwell, Cardinals cheerleaders, Big Red, all on hand. So a pretty cool deal here for the Cardinals right around the stadium, and we've seen this in other markets as well. But Glendale and the Arizona Cardinals coming to a nice agreement here and a nice honor as well to get that up near the stadium.
Yeah, and the previous couple of years, maybe they haven't been on the same page, but obviously the Cardinals in the state of Arizona in the NFL did get awarded a Super Bowl coming up, so it's nice to see Glendale part of that, even though everything's spread out. I assume that the media headquarters will be in downtown Phoenix. There'll be a lot of events in Scottsdale, but I'm glad Glendale's on board. We got some new council members, a new mayor there, so everything is pointing in the right direction.
Yeah, you got the Super Bowl, you got the national championships, Final Four as well. I know they would love to get into the Final Four, but the big one, Super Bowl, right around the corner. And yeah, I say right around the corner because it does sneak up on you real fast here in Arizona. More community news. Tackle DJ Humphreys, along with Cardinals cheerleaders and Big Red, will be in Yuma on Wednesday. It's the first stop on the Cardinals Caravan 4-City Tour, all presented by the Arizona Lottery. For more information, log on to azcardinals.com/caravans. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago. Another great opportunity for those that don't live around Maricopa County or within, I wouldn't say driving distance, but just don't get out to the stadium or training camp. But the Cardinals coming around to your area as well. 4 stops this offseason. And again, DJ Humphreys in Yuma on Wednesday. Now, before we jump feet first on our combine talk here, we want to revisit our Friday conversation with new cornerback Robert Alford. He was very open and very complimentary about Patrick Peterson's involvement in getting him to sign with the Cardinals. In case you missed that, here is Robert Alford.
Once I got off the plane and just got to meet with the coaches and the GM, I just feel comfortable there. And then, like I said, I got to talk with Pat over the phone. I mean, me and Pat are like close friends, and just being able to just play with him on the other side of him and just learning the game from him. That all trickled in on me choosing to be an Arizona Cardinal.
Now, the reason I wanted to bring this up again, and Darren Urban wrote about it on azcardinals.com, but to me, MJ, this speaks volumes for Peterson because, as you and I were talking about it earlier today, remember, it was just 4 months ago. It was in October, and Peterson, though he never really came out and said it, he asked for a trade. He did not want to be here. And now, after a conversation with Michael Bidwell, we've heard him apologize. There was his announcement on the 16th hole at the Waste Management Phoenix Open during the Pro-Am, and then now this. And to me, that's quite a 180 from I don't want to be here to, hey, why don't you join me and let's see if we can't get this turned around here with the Cardinals.
Right, but you pointed out that it came from Schefter, right?
Correct.
So somebody in his camp, whether it was him or his agent, obviously made that request. Patrick obviously didn't. I think, and again, you and I were talking earlier, I think this is more about him going into finally 2 years of his contract, looking where he was the highest paid corner in football, and now he's not. And that's just whoever the young guy is next, they're going to be the highest paid guy. And I think he wanted some reassurances from the ownership, Steve Keim, that they were going to do something in the offseason. Obviously, we've focused so much on the cap space and the draft picks, but, free agency and everything else. And they've already checked that box, corner opposite of Patrick Peterson. So I think the way he looks at it is, clearly nobody likes losing, and it can wear on you. And a guy that, is very confident and plays at a high level, he's in the same boat as the other 52 guys, but I think overall he got reassurances from ownership that we are going to put some more stock. Look what they've done defensively since the season has ended.
Absolutely. The addition of Brooks Reed as well on that defensive side, a teammate of Alford.
And then Swearinger late in the year off the waiver wire.
Farrell Cooper, kick returner, potentially wide receiver option as well. Charles Clay, the tight end. So they are making moves. And you brought it up during the interview to Alford, because when these guys get released and you're eligible to be signed right away, you don't have to wait till free agency starts, but then you get into free agency, and now all of a sudden these players are almost like if they were being recruited all over again in college or to college. Now you're getting recruited to an NFL team, and the big part of that is, okay, well, how much are you going to pay me? But when you have a Patrick Peterson or a Larry Fitzgerald or a Chandler Jones going to bat, they don't have to do this. I don't believe any team is saying, hey, we need you. There might be hey, we wouldn't mind a little assistance, but it's also on the player's shoulders as well. Okay, well, do I believe in what I'm trying to sell you? And for Peterson to be involved in this, have the phone conversation, they're very good friends. I just think, to me, it says something to not only myself, but to Cardinal fans out there that, maybe a mistake was made in October. Peterson is apologized for that, and that is something that no longer, I think, hangs over this offseason, because it has for a while. Because once you said it, people always will go back and say, okay, well, remember when? Do you still feel this way? And it was asked of Peterson towards the end of the season, well, what do you think? I like it, but to hear Alford mention it, and he brought up Peterson's name at least a half a dozen times. And he's excited because now you've got one side of the field no one throws to, and now Alford's going to get a lot of targets, and that makes him excited. But I also think it makes Peterson excited as well, because if you have someone on the other side, at some point a quarterback's going to have to look at 21's direction, because he's going to be on, as we've been told by Vance Joseph, he's going to be on the other team's number one pass-catching threat about 90% of the time, maybe even more.
Yeah, I mean, even though let's say the number one wide receiver lines up on the left side, prior play line on the right side, he's going to be traveling. It's not like you're playing a zone defense where they look for matchups too. You got the third corner in there, and we got a number 3 slot receiver who's a veteran going against a younger guy. We're going to attack that. So the fact is that they have a plan moving forward of how they're going to utilize these guys. And I'm curious to see, just on the free agents, that it appears that the Cardinals will let test the waters, see what they're worth. And those 3 guys are Deion Buchanan, you throw in a Rodney Gunter, and you throw in a guy like Marcus Golden. And so I think that's why it's important if the Cardinals, when they get to the combine, there's a lot of good edge rushers, whether you take Nick Bosa or not, because it's possible you could lose Marcus Golden in free agency.
Absolutely, because, as we said, money talks, and you'd like to have, say, a Rodney Gunter return. Okay, well, what's the cost? I mean, and if it, as you always say, all it takes is one team. And we saw it with Kareem Martin, guy the Cardinals would love to have come back. Giants said, here you go. And Kareem Martin said, okay, well, thank you very much. And all of a sudden, he's no longer wearing a Cardinals uniform.
And who's the Giants DC? James Betcher.
Yeah, so it always helps.
There's connection. And then you look at Tyrann Mathieu. I thought he had a good year. Maybe didn't have all the tackles. He found a position with the Texans, but it wouldn't surprise me if the Buccaneers go after him, maybe offer him $8 million a year. So it's about familiarity. How many coaches on the Cardinals coaching staff that have worked with Vance Joseph in the past? I do think there is recruiting involved here. You're right. Once we get to the numbers, it's okay. Lifestyle, raising a family here, and so I think there's definitely benefits. But Steve did put the full court press on Sean Kugler, because he knew how important that position was to address.
And make no mistake about it, players talk, and we see this in other professions. The NBA comes to mind. Everyone wants to play with everyone else. Bottom line, you want to get paid, but I think it spoke volumes again on what Peterson's involvement in this, and Alford coming out and saying as much. If you missed any of our exclusive interview here on Cards Cover 2, go to azcardinals.com for that. That was last Friday. It was good to catch up with him and just to hear the excitement in his voice during that entire interview.
I got to think Brooks Reed was recruited.
Yes.
In other words, hey, you're from Tucson. You had a really good career. You were drafted by the Texans. You went to Atlanta, played out a position. You're going to come here, and we're going to use you to seal the edge. Whether he starts or not, he's going to be a guy on special teams. So recruiting is involved. Once you agree with the numbers, now it's a matter of like cherry on the sundae.
Absolutely. Speaking Pat P, in advance of the Combine or our involvement in the Combine coming up on Wednesday, Peterson looks back at his experience at the NFL Combine with azcardinals.com.
I am Patrick Peterson, number 37 at the 2011 Combine. My Combine experience was unbelievable. Honestly, I wish I could do it all over again. Ran one of the fastest 40s, jumped out of the building, doing the drills. That was second nature for me. I didn't know how fast I ran, but I did feel that I was flying.
As far as the 40 is concerned, are you kidding me?
Once they told me I ran the 4.32, I believe it was unofficial, and the 4.34 official, I was like, we solidified a spot. To see that I was the player of the day, that made it even that much more memorable and enjoyable.
For those watching the podcast here, Patrick Peterson 8 years ago still has that smile, but the face looks very, very young. I mean, he's young now. I mean, he's not even 30 yet, but he looks very, very young. Almost has a little bit of a baby face, it looks like, but still that smile. Trademark smile has not left him.
And if you go back to that draft, I mean, Ken Whisenhunt was the head coach, and they thought Cincinnati was going to take Patrick Peterson, so they were going to take A.J. Green. It was flipped, actually. The Bengals decided they were going to take A.J. Green, and the Cardinals took Patrick Peterson, and I think it's worked out for both teams.
Absolutely, and that's one of those where you look back and say, okay, well, who was on the board and what do you get? But certainly filled a need, and then you look at what he's been able to do, a Pro Bowler ever since
8 years in a row,
drafted
and counting,
and an All-Pro as well, and definitely has locked down that side of the field, whatever side it is, traveling with the other team's number one wide receiver. This is Cards Cover 2 as we come to you from the Dignity Health Arizona Cardinals Training Center, broadcasting in our Bose QC35s. Go to Bose.com for more information. All right, let's talk a little Combine here, and we touched on this on Friday. And 16 years ago, Kliff Kingsbury was in the same position as these 2019 draft hopefuls, looking to make an impression in Indianapolis. So he's participated in the Combine. He's prepared players for the Combine, and now he finds himself on the other side. And I think that's going to be a unique perspective for him, because it is different being on that side of the table, because as someone who's gone through it, you get coached up for these interviews, but now Kingsbury is going to be in those rooms asking questions and understanding that, hey, when I was in your position, I knew what all the stock answers were. Don't give me that. I want to know who you are as a person, or what you're going to do as a player. So at the end of the Combine, that's going to be something that I'm curious about, Kingsbury's experience, and now all three different ways of the entire Combine experience.
I don't know if he has like major more insight than other guys, just because he knows these college players. Obviously, he's familiar with his conference. But, Steve Keim always says we fall in love with a player in October, November that can run a 4.3. And he said, I'm not really interested in the LL drill, because we're not playing football on Sundays at 1 o'clock running a 3-cone drill. So from that standpoint, and this is a chance to get to know the player and the person. And then maybe when they're not coached on stock answers, now you bring them in for a visit. You get them away from that comfort level. You make it uncomfortable for them. You take them out for dinner. What's their habits? What is their manners? Are they looking you in the eye? There's a lot of things that once you get them away from the Combine because they've been coached so much, you get them here, you watch film, put them on the chalkboard, see whatever position they play, and now you get to know the person, just the player. Because the player, listen, at the end of the day, Steve Keim and every other general manager that morning of the draft, they're looking at film. We cannot get this wrong. And it's a crapshoot. We've watched these guys for 3 years. We still don't know if it's a guarantee. So getting to know the player and the person, but at the end of the day, you're investing a lot of money. It's more about the person, but you have to watch the film and the tape on the player.
And I think Kingsbury's involvement in this kind of gives it a unique perspective for him, a different set of eyes as someone who hasn't been on this side of the fence ever, and now you're in that room offering your advice, your suggestions, and perhaps it does give Kingsbury an advantage when he's talking with these prospects. In fact, it was something that he talked about last week with Paul Calvisi and Lisa Matthews on his podcast, the Kingsbury Chronicle podcast.
I don't think I'm going to understand exactly what goes on until you get there. You know, we have the schedules and we've done the prep work, but until you get there and see the interviews and the schedule and how full it is, I think, you know, you just got to take it one day at a time and keep your head above water.
The fact you just spent the last, your coaching career is in the college game, does that give you any sort of advantage just in talking to some of these college kids, the interview segment, if nothing else?
I think I have a pretty good feel for that age group. You know, I've been around them and just what makes them tick and understand their train of thought. And I think I can ask some pertinent questions regarding the college game and where they're at and their work ethic, things of that nature. So I'm excited. I'll know a bunch of those guys, having coached against them, that we'll talk to and be around. And so I'm excited to see it from this side of things.
And go back, MJ, because you know this more than most as far as a day for these prospects and specifically the interviews, because you're waking up first thing in the morning, you're getting tested, you're getting prodded, there's medicals, there's measurements, you're going through drills, you're speaking to the media, and you're speaking to teams as well, but not every team. But yeah, these are not easy days for these draft hopefuls. I mean, it is long, it is tiring, but you have to understand that it is only going to be for 4 or 5 days, and then you can rest. So you have to be, because you're selling yourself. You want to make such an impression in whatever phase it is to where on draft day, first day, second day, or third day, that when that team time comes up and they're going through who's available, that maybe it's not so much what you did on film, but maybe an answer to a question or how you interacted with the position coach or the general manager or the owner or whomever's in that room, because every little detail matters and every little detail is dissected.
And we talked about those. Each team is allowed to submit 30 names. So you can kind of find out which direction. Now, we don't get those names, but obviously
it leaks sometimes. So
I think, okay, it's 60 interviews and 30 visits. That's what it is. So you put the time in, but these guys are getting up at 5:30 in the morning, maybe 5. They're getting a shuttle to Lucas Stadium, and they can interview up until 11 p.m. So everything you mentioned, interviews, measurements, on-field workouts, media interviews, probably starting at 5:30 now. There's no media availability at 5:30.
Thankfully not.
Right. But for the most part, you're talking about 5:30 to 11 p.m. It's your biggest job interview of your entire life.
That's a good way of putting it, because you're signing on. Hopefully, you're getting drafted, and all of a sudden, if you're a first-round draft pick, that's 4 years, possibility of 5, and it's not the end of the world if you don't get drafted. But even those who don't get drafted and participate in the combine, that can mean a lot as well, because now all of a sudden the tables are turned a little bit. Now you're kind of in control as far as what team might fit you better. But these next 4 days, if you want to count Tuesday or going into the weekend, it goes through Monday as far as all the testing and all the drills. This is the biggest week in a lot of these players' lives, and you can't screw it up.
Well, there's pressure involved, and a lot of these guys have been working out, whether it's here, Florida, California, and that's all they've been doing is preparing for the combine. They have 5 to 8 Wonderlic tests. They go through that. They get coached up there. Some of it's obviously simple, but then there's other things. But for the most part, I mean, medical is going to be huge for a lot of guys, and we don't know about medical and character. Now, some will come out where maybe there's a video out there, and maybe we're not going to see it on draft day because it happened a couple years ago. So the one thing we don't have is medical and character. And again, we're watching the draft and a guy's dropping. You get to the 4th or 5th round, you may take a flyer on, but you're wondering, this guy was ranked on all these mock drafts and everything else, and next thing you know, he's sliding. There's a reason why, and we just don't have that information, and I'm sure it's because of HIPAA laws and everything else. But these guys are going to get poked and prodded. If they have had a prior injury, high school or college, they're going to take a double look at that.
You mentioned the pressure, and when Kingsbury sat down with Paul and Lisa, he remembered 2003 as far as the intensity. It was his word that he used as far as the entire week, and you're trying to sell yourself. You need to make sure you're getting rest, make sure you're eating, but there's almost seems like there's very little time for these players to almost breathe. But it is such a big deal, and I think it's only grown over the years, and now you've got different media, social media, networks, televised, and that's the other thing. Outside of the medicals, obviously, and these interviews, which I would love to be a part of one of those interviews, everything else is out there for the public to view and then all of a sudden dissect for the next month and a half before you get to the draft, because everything gets picked apart. And then that is tough, I think, for a lot, because you forget sometimes that these are 18, 19, 20, 21, 22-year. I mean, these are still, for lack of a better term, these are still kids.
Young men. I mean, they've been out of school for a few years. They've been in a team environment, so from that standpoint, there should be no excuses, because, again, all these guys they're all they're doing right now, because the tape is in. The film, what they did over the last 2.5, 3 years is in. Everyone has a copy of the all 22 film, which is the coach's film. Now it's a matter of, going there and trying to do the best you can. And then a lot of the times, some guys won't run the 40, some guys won't throw. We've talked about some of those names, and then you get to your pro day, and then you get the visits. So it's a process, but it's all going to start coming up this week.
Yeah, I mentioned a couple of the guys that have injuries that are going to show up in Indianapolis, but some won't participate. A couple of Oklahoma players, Marquise Brown, who's well thought of, the wide receiver. He underwent a Liz Frank surgery in January, so he's not going to participate at all in the Combine or the Pro Day, but guys will still go there.
Interview,
and that's still a big part of it. And if you've got tape, and if you're a proven guy, let's bring up Nick Bosa. We know he's coming off a major surgery, a core muscle surgery, but reportedly, I mean, he's going to do everything. But that's, I think, for him, I wouldn't say he has to, because everyone is so high on him, but no one knows what he's done since, September?
Yeah, early October.
So, I mean, I think for him,
I think it's important he does everything, and his medical test is going to be the number one thing. Now, he's fully healed, and I'm glad that he's going to do everything. Curious to see about his bench press. I'm not really crazy about the 40 time. Vertical, just from an athletic standpoint, but he's come out and said, I'm doing everything. I don't think he has to, because you pop in the film and you can see how disruptive and how dominating he was at times. It was the Big Ten, it wasn't the SEC. So for the most part, I think it's important that he does that, because he doesn't want to have any blemishes next to his name. And right now, it's just the ACL that he had coming out of high school, going into college, and then the hernia operation, which they consider a core muscle right now. But to me, that's going to be his biggest thing. And then teams will retest him when they bring him in for a visit. We're going to give you a physical when you're going to come in here.
Yeah, but there is, I mean, I don't know how much teams will do a lot of drill work and when on their visits, but that's the other pressure
everything's on film, so they can go back and watch that.
Yeah, but I'm telling you, during the Combine itself,
yes,
because now there's a spotlight on you, which is it's different, because you're all by yourself. That's the other thing. The NFL is about team. 10 other guys that you're with on the field, offense, defense, special teams. But here now, it's all about you and you performing by yourself, and that, as much as you prepare for it and do it on your own, it's a big difference when you get into a large stadium with no one in there except for a bunch of people with clipboards and stopwatches to try to figure out, what you're doing as far as testing. that can be a little nerve-wracking.
Well, yes, but again, that pro day. Now, if you put up a good 40 time at the combine, you're not going to run at your pro day unless it's on turf or you got a good grass field. You feel like you can improve that. So, again, we'll hear some when we get through the combine as we get closer to the draft. We'll start to hear about guys that are moving up just based on measurables or medical and character, where they check all those boxes. But again, you got to go back to the tape, see what they did, talk to their coaches.
And of course, some tapes are better than others. I mean, what's the competition like? I mean, are you in the SEC? Are you a small school? Who'd you face?
Right.
And that makes it a little bit difficult sometimes. Okay, if you're a small school player like a Chase Edmonds, okay, how do you transition? How does your skill set compare and then translate to the NFL level when guys have been going up against Power 5 conferences and guys who are much bigger, faster, stronger than what you faced?
Yeah, and that's where guys separate themselves. And Chase Edmonds had a really good combine, and Kirby Wilson was on him, and he went to his pro day. I think he was only a few running backs coaches. Now, in the Cardinals, and I've mentioned this in the past, don't mean to be redundant, but when the Cardinals were scouting Shane Ray, Marcus Golden popped out on the tape.
I do remember them saying about that, yes.
He popped out. And here Shane Ray went in the first round. Cardinals get Golden, I want to say, in the second round. Was it the second or third round? They got him in the second round, right? Golden? Could have been third. Anyways, point is.
Second round.
Second round, okay. Point is, though, they were looking at Shane Ray, and Marcus Golden popped out. So that's interesting, just watching some tape on. And I'm sure when they were looking at Budda Baker, John Ross, they had some good corners up there. They got one of the best defensive backs coaches in football at the University of Washington. So they've been studying Budda for a couple of years, but now when you get to the John Rosses, who had the fastest 40 time at the combine, you start looking at other players and they stick out, and then you start doing your research on those guys.
Yeah, and you all of a sudden find yourself doing more work than what you maybe had originally went into as far as the game film for a particular player. But we know General Manager Steve Keim loves the combine. It kind of takes him back to his roots as a scout. Medicals, huge interviews, just as big, if not bigger, as long as you don't have anything that pops out on the medical standpoint. But during a recent appearance on Doug and Wolf on 98.7 FM, Arizona Sports Station, Keim talked about that interview process and what he hopes to hear from these draft hopefuls.
The one thing that we do is we're extremely prepared for every interview. So we'll have bullet points already set up to address any specific red flags that we have, whether it's off-field issues, whether there are issues from, work ethic standpoint that we want to address. And then we'll be prepared to watch film with them or get on the grease board if there are any guys that we have concerns whether they can process and learn. So there are a number of different things, but I think more than anything, just getting to know about the player's background, because it's fascinating the type of information that you can learn. I mean, I've had amazing stories of guys who've graduated in 3.5, 4 years that have done a lot of things with their life that are amazing to me when I find out that they lived for 3 months in a car with their mom and they were homeless. Again, fascinating stories, and so many of those things that are positives and guys that make good on their lives that aren't talked about enough. Really, we talk about the negative things, and that's what we focus on, when there's so many positive things and so many things to be proud of that these young men accomplish.
Again, I would just love to be a fly on the wall during one of those interviews. And sometimes Cardinals Flight Plan will give you a sneak peek at those interviews after the Cardinals have selected a player in the draft. But certainly you hear Keim talk about passion. Do you have passion for the game of football? Because that can come out not on film, but during those sit-down interviews. And then you throw in Michael Bidwell, former prosecutor, who is a great read of people, and any little thing that you can draw out of a person during this very finite amount of time that you have with them, there's a list that goes now all of a sudden next to that player's names, and this cannot overstate it enough. This is huge this week and the following weeks ahead of April.
Yeah, and I think free agency is fine, especially when you got cap space, maybe a plug-and-play guy, a guy maybe you're going to lose in a year or two, so you get a player in here on a 2 or 3 year contract. But the most part, this is how you build the belly of your football team. And the Cardinals have 11 draft picks. Obviously, they have a lot in round 6 and 7, so maybe they can parlay that to get up to either for a future pick or move it to the 5th round. So, and I have a hard time thinking 11 guys are going to make this roster just based on what they're going to do in free agency. And we all know you get to the 6th and 7th round, you're starting to work the undrafted free agent list. And we know there was a few guys last year, Dennis Gardeck, Zeke Turner, Jalen Tolliver, Trent Sherfield, just to name a few. So just because you don't get drafted and you get to the 6th and 7th round, and I'm sure it's a dream for every one of those guys to hear their name called, but obviously you can pick and choose. And we've talked about Tony Jefferson and his agent, why they picked Arizona, because they let go of Kerry Rhodes and Adrian Wilson.
That's one of the most recent, best examples, at least from a Cardinals perspective, as far as if you don't, the disappointment of not hearing your name called that weekend. Okay, use that as motivation, a chip on your shoulder. Jefferson did that, played very, very well, and parlayed that into a nice contract for himself and his family. Just unfortunate it wasn't here with the Arizona Cardinals.
And when they sent in his paperwork to the NFL evaluation, he was told he was going to be a second-round pick. Maybe he had bad 40 time. Maybe he was undersized. But here now he's playing with the Ravens, a really good defense.
Absolutely. Quick programming note here. Obviously, with the Cardinals in Indianapolis, no Kingsbury Chronicle podcast. It airs every other Tuesday. So this week's episode is the Coaches Chronicle podcast, and the special guest that will be joining Paul Calvisi and Lisa Matthews is linebackers coach Bill Davis. My guess is Nick Bosa will pop into that conversation, since Davis the past 2 years has been the linebackers coach at Ohio State.
Yeah, and I got a chance to talk to him when they had meet and greet with the media here, and we talked a lot about Dwayne Haskins. He thinks he's going to be a really good quarterback. And again, he's not a runner. He's a guy that can go 5 to 8
Stands
yards.
in the pocket.
Stands in the pocket, can make all the throws, very accurate, can throw in tight windows. And again, besides Murray, we're hoping Haskins can make some noise there, because somebody's going to move up. And, I get this all the time on Twitter. Well, the Cardinals should trade the first pick and then move down. And I'm like, okay, first of all, this isn't fantasy football. You have to find a trade partner. Is somebody moving up for the first pick in the draft because it's a steep price? Is somebody moving up for the third pick in the draft because it's a little bit less, but it's still going to cost you a good amount of compensation? So, again, these conversations will start taking place. Free agent conversations will start taking place, whether it's your own free agents or possible new free agents. So this is when these guys earn their money, because you're going to see when you're walking around from the hotel to Lucas Oil Stadium or field, you're going to see agents in the corner talking to general managers.
Yeah, there's a lot of discussions, advanced discussions for.
They always say that's where the tampering starts.
Well, you're just having a conversation.
Well,
for your own free agents, you're allowed to speak. Yes.
Yes, exactly, and I'm sure Rosenhaus has got over 100 clients. Other guys got 50, 60. So it's not like you're just asking for this other guy. You're talking about your players, because they want to get an understanding when they go to free agency too.
Absolutely. It is a Monday afternoon here from the Dignity Health Arizona Cardinals Training Center. We are broadcasting, as we always do, in our Bose QC35s. Just go to Bose.com for more information. Before we let the Bird Gang sound off here on this Monday, we wrap up our Combine preview with some words of wisdom, advice, if you will, from some current Cardinal players to those draft hopefuls.
DJ Humphries here with the Arizona Cardinals. My advice to all the guys headed to the Combine coming up here this weekend, just believe in yourself, man, and give your best effort. I went to the Combine. I was projected a 4th, 5th round pick. I left the Combine a 1st round draft pick. So believe in yourself. Don't let nobody tell you what you can't do or what you ain't going to do. Go out there and do it. Show the world what you can do.
What's up, guys? Mason Cole from the Arizona Cardinals. Just want to wish all of the guys going to the Combine good luck. It's 3 long days, so just make sure you get your sleep, be yourself, and do everything you can not to be nervous.
Hey, man, Chase Edmonds here. Just wanted to wish all the guys, man, going to the Combine. Special shout-out to the FCS guys. It was a life-changing experience for me. Just want to wish you guys the best of luck, man. Stay focused when you get that opportunity of a lifetime, man. Just really focus on your training, harness on all the techniques that you practice, man. Don't make the moment too big. Go out there and just grind like you've always been doing, man. Good luck.
Great message from all 3 players. The one that really stuck out, though, was Mason Cole saying, get your rest. And that's easier said than done. He's very well aware of it. We even talked about it here. But you're waking up early, you're going to bed late, and even at that end of the long day, I don't know about you, MJ, but it is hard. You cover a game or whatever it is, and you get home. All right, it's time to go to bed.
Can't wind down.
You gotta give yourself. And some people it takes longer than just a half hour or an hour, but to kind of let that adrenaline come down so you can relax and get some rest. It's
got to be nerve-wracking when you leave an interview and you know that team maybe have a need at that certain position, and it's keeping you up all night. How did I answer that question? Did I answer it the right way? Did I tell them what they wanted to hear, or was I telling them what I thought?
Yeah.
Right?
Like, let me do it again. And sometimes you're like, oh, I wish I had said this, or I shouldn't have said that.
And I'm sure it happens when you walk. Now you got to go to another team, though.
Yeah.
So now you've obviously studied what you said, and maybe it's a little bit different for another team. That's why it's good to have that stuff on film.
Mind tricks. Be very, very interesting what comes out of this coming week here in Indianapolis. All right, without further ado, let's see what the Bird Gang is sounding off here on this Monday using the hashtag #CardsCover2. Hashtag #CardsCover2 with the number 2 to get involved in the show. We'll begin with Twitter. This user wants to know if all running backs are healthy for 16 games, who do you see with more snaps? David Johnson, Chase Edmonds?
Well, I mean, I'm not calling the plays, but if I connect the dots, David Johnson's going to be the bell cow. He needs to get 1,800 yards, get back to double digits and touchdowns, be the focal point of the offense. I like Chase Edmonds. I think there's a role for him, but clearly David Johnson is the bell cow.
Curious, and we might have to keep track of this once we kind of see where things pan out in training camp, but how many times we see, one, both of them on the field at the same time.
Sign me up.
And two, how many times Johnson is split out as a wide receiver, either all the way or inside in the slot, because we heard some weeks we were going to see it, and it just never materialized last season.
Yeah, and again, we've talked about what Kingsbury offense could look like. We know it's going to be a lot of 3 wide receiver sets, 1 tight, 1 back. A lot of times, if Rosen can get rid of the ball, and that's going to be the idea, he's got to play smarter. We know he's accurate on some of those tight throws. But I want to see him, if Josh is in the shotgun, line up right to the right of him, and within seconds, throw the ball to David Johnson. Let him start getting on his horse and trying to take people out as he's running down the field. So it's not going to be stationary so much. It's going to be on the move.
Let's move to Instagram. User wants to know, do you think this year will be Josh Rosen's breakout year?
We hope so. I mean,
Exactly.
Usually you see strides from year 1 to 2. I think hopefully the game will slow down for him, even though he doesn't agree with that. But he's going to get coached up well with Tom Clements, not only the passing game coordinator, but also the quarterback's coach. And then you throw in Kliff Kingsbury, his background working with Mayfield and Johnny Manziel. And then you even throw in a guy like I guess even who is Case Keenum. Just some different quarterbacks that have succeeded in the NFL. And I'm not a big Case Keenum fan. I think he was a one-hit wonder. But for the most part, I mean, I would look at it from a standpoint of, we all talk about this, getting this right. I just want to go back to what was the question?
Breakout year for Josh.
Yeah, I think you want to see progress in year 2. You don't want to see him take a step back. But I think his confidence, because he's the main guy, I think they're going to work with him, and you got to give him some weapons, though, right?
Absolutely. And the whole aspect of things slowing down, it's the decision-making.
Yes.
As far as that becomes a little bit quicker. Where do you want the ball to go to even before the ball is snapped?
Well, and what he went through last year, anytime you're playing against a rookie quarterback, they're going to throw the kitchen sink. So maybe things he'll see a little bit identical. Now, it's all based on matchups week to week. They're going to try different things on him, but maybe he'll see some stuff that he was able to see last year, and he can apply it to this year.
Back to the questions here on Bird Gang Sound Off. What do you guys think is the biggest offseason need for the Cardinals?
They got to address the offensive line, defensive line, wide receiver. They already signed a tight end, Charles Clay. I got to think linebacker. And they got to add more speed to this team, I think, offense and defense, and I think they've done that with Robert Alford.
Yeah, offensive line, for me, address it, figure it out, and either way, draft, free agency, guys coming back healthy, and then playmakers, wide receivers, tight ends. You kind of address the tight end position, but guys that you are confident will be able to do what Kingsbury wants to do within this offense.
Yeah, it's huge. They went out and got Clay and Robert Alford because there were 2 needs going into the offseason.
Yeah, and both those boxes have been checked. Last questions, and this is something that has been on a lot of Cardinal fans' minds. We'll address it here on Cards Cover 2. Antonio Brown, something the Cardinals are considering. This user wants to know if that is the actual case?
I have no idea. They don't come out and tell us who they're going after.
They don't tell you, really?
No, and any player that's available. Now, according to the Steelers, 3 teams have reached out. They have some criteria. They're not going to trade him to the Patriots or inside the division. So, what I'm concerned is that Seattle or the Niners go after him. But right now, I don't think he's going to get had for a first-round pick. Again, it only takes one team. That 33rd pick is very attractive, but maybe I'll go for Harry from ASU, young player, have him under contract for 4 or 5 years, depending on if you can jump back in the first round. So I don't know, but I hope he doesn't end up in the NFC West.
1, tell me what it's going to cost. And then 2, even knowing the cost with a young quarterback, a first-year NFL head coach, I just don't know right now if it's something that you would want to do and if it fits within that locker room.
And I hear this, Larry Fitzgerald's a great mentor. He's a great competitor. He's a great leader. But I don't think that's Larry's responsibility to babysit someone. This guy's 31 years old.
Well, the Steelers had a great locker room, a lot of veterans in that locker room,
Especially
and look what
on the
happened
offensive
there.
line, yeah.
So, it's unfair to put that on the shoulders of a Larry Fitzgerald. It's easy to say, and I understand connecting the dots, but as you said, it's not his responsibility, and he can only do so much. I mean, he's not around these players 24/7. He leads by example. And, I'd put it this way. I'd be surprised if it happened.
Yeah, you never know. Obviously it's going to dictate what they do in free agency and the draft. But if I told you today you'd have Rosen, Bosa, and Harry in the first 2 picks in the draft, would you sign up for it?
I would sign up for that, absolutely.
Me too, in a heartbeat.
Because you've addressed now
playmaker. I'm taking the whole 10 minutes on the clock for national
course.
brand. I mean, I know the people say they're going to run to the podium. Nah.
That's why we always, you've been on the clock since January, and then you take the entire time once television starts, but it's made for TV. It's what they do.
Yeah, and ABC is going to broadcast it now. It's going. It's going.
Just how big the NFL has. gotten.
Fox has always done a good job. ESPN, the NFL Network, but now it's going to be on the Big Daddy ABC.
And ABC going to be in Indianapolis as well for 2 hours on Saturday, and even bigger this year because Cards Cover 2 is going to be in Indianapolis as well.
Very nice.
Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday appointment viewing for those watching and listening for those listening on the podcast. And that's going to do it here on this Monday edition of Cards Cover 2. Special thanks to those behind the scenes, Tim Delaney, Jim Alejandro, Devin Henry, and Jackson Sipes. For Mike Jurecki, I'm Craig Grialou. We'll talk to you on Wednesday from the 2019 NFL Combine. This has been Cards Cover 2.